Hi everybody. I'm not in the best of moods today. It's been kind of a stressful day. One of the things that helps me unwind is to do videos like this and discuss topics that are going on. Sometimes it is frustrating because the topics themselves are, but it is therapeutic. And one of the things that I think is an interesting story today is the whole issue of Donald Trump wanting to possibly nominate Joseph Lieberman as the next FBI director. Now, don't get me wrong, I really don't have anything like huge against Joseph Lieberman. You have to remember, I grew up in a Democratic household, so my political opinions kind of developed a little later, after probably I turned 20 or so, especially during the 2008 election when Ron Paul came along. I'd already been moving towards conservatism, so when Joseph Lieberman first came to the public eye as a mass, national figure of knowledge, it was, of course, he was the vice presidential nominee under Al Gore in 2000. Then in 2004, he actually ran for president himself. He didn't even come close to winning the nomination. And I think that he would have not been a very good, I mean, he may have been like a passable president. I don't think he would have been a good president. I think he would have probably been about as bland of a character as there's been as president, and not just bland, but like ineffective. He kind of reminds me, there used to be this governor in California, Gray Davis, who, like his name suggests, he's gray. He's pretty much like a high school principal. And Gray Davis was such a bad governor and so uninspiring that he was the first governor to be recalled, so far as I know. I think there might have been somebody before him, but that was like in the distant past. So Joe Lieberman, it says here, you can see on the screen. I'm not going on camera right now just because it slows down the video too. So Senate Democrats reject Lieberman for FBI director, and they're going over, this is Politico, by the way, they're going over the fact that even if Donald Trump were to nominate this guy who was once the Democratic nominee for vice president, he was also once a you have to remember, he ran for president as a Democrat against George Bush. The Democrats are likely to reject this choice, and I think this is a case where Donald Trump is using, pool hall style tactics. Okay, caroming a ball off of a billiard bank in order to hit a different pocket. It's an interesting strategy. I don't know if it's going to work, but he's done some interesting things today, like so far. So I'm not saying this is. I'll tell you in a second if I think it's a good choice or a bad choice. But as far as a strategy approach, I think it's one of the more interesting ones I've seen because, let's face it. I mean, this would be the equivalent of let's say if he was to nominate. There's other people that have run for the Democratic nomination. If he would have run, he could have nominated Martin O'Malley for the nomination for the Senate. And the point that they're going to get across is very simple, is that it doesn't matter if Donald Trump were to nominate Harry Reid, the most partisan, venomous Democrat that there's been. He was Senate Majority Leader. He would engage in outright personal attacks on Republicans while he was in the Senate, which I think, is that's a fair tactic in my world, but in the Senate it's kind of rare. And Harry Reid was pretty much loose cannon when it came to making political statements. I don't think many of you remember that he actually said about Barack Obama that he's good because he's well spoken and he doesn't speak in a Negro dialect, except if he wanted to. Now, a lot of people, even on the Democratic side, thought that was a bizarre statement. when he said it. They never held him to account for it, but he said it. And here they're writing, President Donald Trump may be dramatically miscalculating how much support Senator Joe Lieberman would have among his former Democrat colleagues if nominated to become FBI director. Some Senate Democrats hold a grudge against Lieberman for his rightward turn in opposition to some of President Barack Obama's agenda late in his Senate career. Others say even though they respect Lieberman, the job of FBI director should not go to a former politician. And all Democratic senators interviewed for this story said the former Connecticut senator lacks the kind of experience needed for this post. I think you guys are already used to me and my coughing fits, so. But for those that aren't, I apologize. Nothing I can do about it except maybe see a pulmonary surgeon or something. The 2000 Democratic vice presidential candidate, who later caucused with the party as an independent in the Senate after losing his 2006 Senate primary, has emerged as a frontrunner to replace fired FBI Director James Comey. But Lieberman's nomination likely would produce the most partisan vote for an FBI chief in Senate history. Typically, nominees for the job have been approved unanimously or with token opposition. So you have the usual people. There's Claire McCaskill saying that she would not vote against Joe Lieberman. I don't know how they always find Claire McCaskill to comment. She probably should not go in front of cameras since she's one of the least charismatic people, I think, in politics today. She was lucky when she ran for re-election in 2012 that she had pretty much a mental midget running on the Republican side, a guy who made comments that show that he was basically one of those Bible-thumping radicals from the 1990s. The legitimate rape comment was one of them. They need somebody who's truly going to have like a head on his shoulders to run against her. She says we don't need anyone who's put on a red shirt or blue shirt or who's campaigned for president. So Lieberman ran for president in 2004. So they're actually saying, oh, we don't want somebody who's a confirmed, Democrat or whatever. Then it goes to say that, their Republicans are getting behind Lieberman, etc. And then it says here, he has a history of angering Democrats and Republicans, which is probably a good experience for being FBI director. But my concern is about somebody with a political background. This is a moment for someone with a law enforcement background, said Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who holds Lieberman's old seat. It's really important to restore people's faith in the FBI. And then it says, even Democratic moderates like McCaskill and Joe Manchin are not going to support him. And then it has here, still many liberals flat out don't like Lieberman. In an interview, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio fumed about Lieberman's efforts to undercut more generous Medicare benefits in Obamacare and his relative closeness to Trump. After a monologue on Lieberman's faults, Brown ended by telling a reporter, "That's all on the record. Joe Lieberman has no real law enforcement credentials. Look where he works now, a Trump law firm. That tells me a lot." Okay, so as for the charge about him being in Donald Trump's law firm, he works for Kasowitz, Benson, Torres and Friedman, which is a major law firm. It basically, they're a corporate attorney. They work for Liggett, which is a tobacco company. They've done work for Enron and WorldCom, and that's not a bad criticism. The problem I'm seeing is that a lot of these problems, they came, first of all, before Lieberman left the Senate. So it's not really his fault. Okay, Donald Trump started using this law firm apparently since 2001. Okay, Joe Lieberman started after he left the Senate in 2013. And you know what? I think it's a fair criticism. I don't think it's that big of an issue. Okay, it's almost like something that would be, deduct like a half point if we're even keeping a score here. But it's not even Look, there's so many people that they go into private practice after they leave office. Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch are both private practicing attorneys now here. Okay, Covington and Burling, which is a major international law firm all across the world. The firm advises multinational corporations. Who's one of their main current and former attorneys? They have Dean Acheson, who was former secretary. I think he was former head of the FBI, or no, he was head of the CIA. You have Kit Bond, who's a senator now. You have Eric Holder, that's the person I was about to bring up. They have all these guys these are top law firms. Okay, John Kyle here. John Kyle is also a senator with the Republican Party right now. You have all these people that are major attorneys. If you were going to disqualify him because he worked at a law firm that serves Donald Trump, I think you're really splitting hairs. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to whether I think that Joe Lieberman is a good choice or not, and why I agree or disagree with the Democrats. There's a few issues where I think that they have a point where they'd say, of course, I'd say that this is not the real choice. This is Trump's strategy. He will propose Joe Lieberman, who will be rejected, and the story will be, I'll present the story as far as Trump is setting it up, okay? However, the Democrats do have a point, okay? I myself would not want the head of the FBI to be a former senator or a former politician of any stripe. I think that you need somebody that is definitely from the straight professional category. And I've actually, I've I've been listening to a couple people today. Styx Hexenhammer, who's, he's blowing up. He's becoming a major commentator now across YouTube, at least. He made a notable issue that Joe Lieberman, for example, was for censoring video games back before video games were really as violent as they are today. I mean, forget about violence. The graphics were not even close to being realistic. This was in the mid-90s. He would have been talking about GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and the early Grand Theft Autos and things like that. Those were his issues, his pet issues. Let's go to the top. Let's have him on screen. Joe Lieberman. Let's bring up a little video of him, okay?
Disturbing the peace in this motherfucker, man. Just getting started. Ludacris, I-20 with the Neptunes going to something like they want to know why I hit like that spit.
Okay, so that's not exactly what I was expecting. Let's find another one. Okay, this is from the actual debate in 2000 with Dick Cheney.
Has determined that the first question will go to the Democratic candidate. Senator, few hardworking Americans would base their well-being on bonuses they hope to get 5 or 10 years from now. Why do you, and you, Secretary Cheney, predict surpluses you cannot possibly guarantee to pay for your proposed programs?
Bernie, before I answer that very important question, let me first thank you for moderating the debate. Let me thank the wonderful people here at Center College and throughout Kentucky for being...
So, classic political answer. Hold on.
...opportunity Al Gore has given me this year. And finally, let me thank my family that is here with me, my wife Hadassah, our children, our siblings, and my mom. My 85-year-old mom gave me some good advice about the debate earlier today. She said, sweetheart, as she is prone to call me, remember, be positive and know that I will love you no matter what your opponent says about you. well, Mom, as always, that was both...
See, I mean, can you get beyond that? It's just a question, okay?
The people of this country, education, health care, retirement security, and moral values. I'm going to describe the plan that Al Gore and I have for keeping America's prosperity going and making sure that it benefits more of America's families, particularly the hardworking middle-class families who have not yet fully benefited from the good times we've had. And Bernie, I'm going to explain tonight how we're going to do all this and remain fiscally responsible. Let me briefly get to your question.
You have about 10 seconds.
So that's Joe Lieberman. That's his character. He wasn't just, you know, this was a guy. He's everything that Donald Trump should not want in a FBI director, and that's why I think, you know, I'm hoping against hope that Donald Trump in the end withdraws him, or if he does propose him, or that he doesn't nominate him at all. I think there has to be somebody like Andrew McCarthy as the nominee. And as for the other points where, you know, they were saying, you know, he was fighting with the other Democrats, yeah, I think Joe Lieberman was a paper Democrat. He was he's what they call rhinos and dinos, the Republican in name only or Democrat in name only. Those are the people that the bases of both parties who are really getting screwed left and right anyway. They define as the people that are at the center of the political spectrum. They're always cutting deals with the other side. They're always looking to show how bipartisan they are. And those are the people that, when crunch time happens, when there's like a major crisis of whatever administration is going on, and in Lieberman's case, it was the Bush administration. Whenever a crisis starts brewing, these guys will they will be the first to lose basically their party's support in their primaries. Okay, in the case of Joe Lieberman, okay, let's switch gears for a second. In 2006, the Democratic Party was pretty much fighting to the death to attack George Bush because of the war in Iraq, and Lieberman had been a huge supporter of the war. He'd been probably Bush's most dependable ally on the Democratic side, except for Ted Kennedy and Hillary Clinton. So there you go. The Democratic Party was basically full of people who were full of shit. They were all supporting most of Bush's policies, and suddenly, come 2008, you know, Hillary was like, "Oh, you know, I got to make up for, you know, 8 years of supporting policies that are the exact opposite of what I'm talking about right now." And Joe Lieberman was probably the most obvious person who was on the chopping block. There were people. There was this guy Ned Lamont. He ran for the Democratic nomination and beat him by a decent margin. That's 10,000 votes. You can see here. Sorry, that doesn't really show it that well, but it's more than 10,000 votes. Joe Lieberman lost the Connecticut nomination. And then in the general election, Lieberman still won. It was one of the toughest. So anyway, he was popular enough at the time that he won Connecticut by 10 points, even as an independent. And then he ended up caucusing with the Democrats the rest of his career. I think that the Democratic Party never completely accepted him back into the fold after that, because the Democratic Party has lurched left since probably since 2000. Okay, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, yes, they might have some liberal beliefs, but at their foundation, they don't have any a real integrity to hold on to them. They're both corporate whores, and they were the people who defined the Democratic Party in the 2000s, or in the 90s and then into the 2000s. Let's go back to looking at his issues here. You know, he came in, he was nominated for vice president. One of the controversies over it was the fact that he hadn't been as big of a Clinton ally as many of the other senators were. He'd openly criticized him during the Lewinsky scandal, which is one of the reasons that people are claiming, you know, he wouldn't be so. He would be that's one of the only angles I could see where Donald Trump would actually get an advantage out of Joe Lieberman. Joe Lieberman would possibly allow a full investigation into Hillary Clinton, but how could you know? Okay, he supported Hillary Clinton in the 2008 and 2016 elections. He's never truly broken with her. And by the way, that's something that Democrats ought to learn how to do. You know, you don't have to. Joe Biden actually did it today. Pretty late in the game, though. He says Biden reportedly slams Clinton. I never thought she was the correct candidate. Hold on, let me mute this tab because we're going to get some turbulence here. It says, I never thought she was the correct candidate, Biden said at the SALT conference in Las Vegas. I thought I was the correct candidate. Well, gee, Joe, people were begging you to run. I wonder why. Maybe because you had no balls, that's why Hillary Clinton did end up being the nominee, and you did nothing. You basically, and he stumped for her on the trail. Joe Biden would go out there. Let's look at this. Okay, this is how full of shit our politicians are. And you know, there's plenty of people on the Republican side that you could say the same thing about. Mike Huckabee, for example, I don't think he really believes in Donald Trump as a leader.
You know, I've known Hillary for well over 30 years. Before she was First Lady of the United States, when she became First Lady, we served together in the United States Senate, and during her years as Secretary of State, once a week, we had breakfast in my home, the Vice President's residence. Everybody knows she's smart. Everybody knows she's tough. But I know what she's passionate about. I know Hillary. Hillary understands. Hillary gets it. Hillary understands that college loan is about a lot more than getting a qualified student education. It's about saving the mom and the dad from the indignity of having to look at their talented child and say, Sonny, honey, I'm so sorry.
So you can see here, Joe Biden, you know, he went to stump for Hillary Clinton in 2016, even though he knew. He says, I never thought she was the correct candidate. I thought I was the correct candidate. Well, maybe you should have changed your tune. Maybe you shouldn't have shown up to the DNC and said things that were blatant lies then. Okay. Anyway, so we got off topic a bit, but you know, this is important. Okay. The real person who should be nominated, and I think might ultimately get the nod, is Andrew McCarthy. He's a former prosecutor. He's also had a career where he's dealt with radical Islam. One of the more knowledgeable professional people in politics or anywhere that has a notion of what is at stake with regards to terrorism and the law. He's a very professional lawyer. It doesn't have any knocks against him in terms of his professional abilities. So here's the strategy as far as I'm concerned. Okay, Donald Trump will nominate Joe Lieberman, and the Democrats will basically run up against the Pikes and oppose him on the basis of some of the flimsiest notions. You know, the fact that he was that he, you know, whatever. The fact that he's with that law firm, for example, which I think, you know, it's not that it doesn't mean anything. I think it's you have to have something else. Okay, I'm not going to say that it's not a problem. I'm just saying that it's not a problem that would disqualify him. I think if he were to be somebody who personally defended Donald Trump in a court, you know, or somebody who has handled his business, and we were to discover that. Yeah, I think that would be an issue. You do need somebody who's completely independent of him, you know, Donald Trump. The issue that I see there is that, you know, the Clintons didn't care about that when they basically made Webb Hubbell, who was Hillary Clinton's law partner and basically her best buddy at the Rose Law Firm. they made him the Associate Attorney General. Okay, so that's not the head of the FBI. I'll admit that, but it's still an issue. Okay, so they're going to reject Joe Lieberman if Donald Trump opposes him, and Donald Trump would then possibly withdraw Joe Lieberman. Okay, and propose Andrew McCarthy. Now the Democrats will also vote against Andrew McCarthy, but, and this is an important issue here, he will now be able to say this: the Democratic Party has already rejected a guy who was their nominee for vice president in 2000 and ran for president as a Democrat in 2004 and didn't make it past the primaries, but that's besides the point. They've rejected somebody like that. Okay, I can't get anybody that the Democrats are going to approve of. People are already like throwing out examples. He could nominate Jesse Jackson as Attorney General, and the Democrats would still oppose it because it has to do with Trump, which is true. And you know, this is an issue where I have to side with Donald Trump, whereas in other issues I don't know whether I don't know whether to support him, and in some cases I definitely oppose him. You know, like his nominees for Treasurer and Secretary of State. Those are issues where I've out and out opposed him. But in terms of who he's nominating, okay, there's somebody here who is a person that supposedly the Democrats should be able to stomach. Their notions of why he would be rejected are kind of flimsy, you know, except for the part where he's a politician. But that's going to go over their heads. Okay, now that there's these statements out, the Sherrod Brown statement is Sherrod Brown's from Ohio. The guy's probably the least, the least bipartisan senator there is. He said, what do you say? He complained that Joe Lieberman wanted to undercut generous Medicare benefits and Obamacare. One of the reasons is that they hate him because he was a clear opponent of Barack Obama. Because Joe Lieberman was a personal friend of John McCain. He loved John McCain. They're buddies. It's not something. That's one of the reasons I would oppose Joe Lieberman, because I oppose John McCain. So this is a brilliant move on the part of Donald Trump. First of all, he can screw with John McCain, because if John McCain were to vote against Joe Lieberman, it would show that he's completely lost his shit and he just hates Donald Trump, because Joe Lieberman and John McCain were basically bosom buddies when they were both in the Senate together. Okay, so he squares that circle, or circles that square. Sorry, I got the expression backwards. The other part is that he will now be able to say, look, I already threw them a bone and they threw it back at me. Now, excuse me. Now I'm going to nominate who I want, and that's a good move. I think it could work. As usual, I don't know whether Trump's logic is going to win. I'm deeply studying the healthcare issues, and I'm of course I'm commenting on them, and those are where I'm focused. So, I think this is going to be a very interesting game of chess between Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer, and really Chuck Schumer throughout the rest of the congressional term ending in 2018 is going to be pretty much boxed in. He has very little latitude to work with. The Senate Democrats could propose laws, but in many cases they don't even know what they want. If you don't know what you want, then there's no reason anybody would support you. And Donald Trump, just to fuck with him, he could do something like say, oh yeah, I support what you just proposed, just to fuck with Chuck Schumer, because if he were to support one of Chuck Schumer's laws, one of his proposals, then Chuck Schumer would be on the crazy situation where he's on the same side as Donald Trump, which for him would be political acid. Okay, if Donald Trump were to do this, this is the way it's going to play out for the rest of his term. it's going to be cat and mouse. It's going to be Schumer trying to show that he's anti-Trump as much as possible, even in the most ridiculous situation, because otherwise he's basically alienating the rest of his party in the public domain. Anything that he does, the Democratic base are going to nip at his heels or even blindside him. They're gonna attack him left and right. Even though Schumer obviously has hated Donald Trump viscerally since he won the election, probably before that. So anyway, it's an interesting topic. We'll have probably more on it later when there's more developments. This is Ramon, bold like a leopard. Let me know what you think. Andrew McCarthy, head of the FBI, that's the guy I think would be the best choice. People have been talking about him. They're not people that have any in with Donald Trump, so I can't predict anything with it. It's not something that I am floating in there as a likely choice. Okay, so I'm not one of those people using, obviously I'm just a guy on this computer, but I'm not floating this as something that is in the offing. I just think it is the best choice based on the people that I know about. Have a great weekend. This is Ramon, bold like a leopard, and comment below.